Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. The midterm elections were quite disappointing for Republicans who expected a red wave. But what was most surprising is that issues like inflation, crime, immigration, and others didn't motivate voters to give the Democrats the shellacking people predicted. But perhaps things have to get worse before the people decide they have had enough. I have with me Liberty Nation's political columnist, Joe Schaefer, who wrote an article about this very thing to discuss this. Welcome to the program, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Great to be here.
Yes, you wrote a very interesting article suggesting that maybe things do have to get worse before they get better. Before we dive into that, can you kind of give us a quick overview of the article about the midterms and what might motivate voters to finally vote against the Democrats?
Well, sure. I'd like to talk about another article I wrote, which is related to it. Before the election, I wrote that Democrats were having problems in supposedly safe states, and that this was worrisome for them because if they can't control the narrative in blue dominant states, what does that mean for the rest of the country? And there were a couple interesting things going on. You mentioned crime and illegal immigration. In Massachusetts, the progressive state legislature predictably passed a measure, they've been trying to do it for years, to allow illegal aliens to have driver's licenses. Massachusetts, no surprise, everyone think, but whoa, wait a second. A bunch of citizens rallied, said we don't want this, came up with a petition. The petition was successful and it got on the referendum. So that was a blowback that they probably didn't expect in Massachusetts. Similarly, in New York, you had Kathy Hochul running for governor, struggled mightily in her campaign against Lee Selden. He ran specifically heavily on crime, beating that over and over and over again. And that was a real weak spot for Hochul in a blue state. So you see crime, illegal immigration being these negative issues in blue states. As these problems get worse, and they're going to get worse because there was no electoral rebuke to Joe Biden and Democrats on November 8th, more eyes are going to be open. And I just think it's very significant that 1 million Massachusetts citizens voted against illegal aliens having driver's licenses. For that, such a progressive state to do that, that is a sign that something's going on.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, even Mayor Eric Adams in New York City was elected on largely a law and order platform. I mean, you had efforts to recall these woke district attorneys across the country as well. But why do you think this wasn't what we've been seeing over the past 2 years? Why wasn't this enough to motivate them to vote against Democrats in the midterms? I mean, the Republicans did take the House, but it's a slim margin, and the Democrats retained the Senate. So why wasn't this enough, in your opinion?
Well, as I tried to present in the article, and I can flesh it out here maybe a little more, I've been thinking about this so much since 2016. You know, why hasn't there been more change? Why haven't the American people demanded even more change? A good percentage of people are still comfortable with what they consider the existing system. You know, the system works for me, quote, which we've all heard before. A friend of mine who lives in Pennsylvania, lives in suburban Philadelphia, grew up in a very blue-collar Irish Catholic neighborhood, the kind of people you think would be America first, all for Trump. He had told me before the 2020 election, he said, there's a lot of people I know, a lot of people I grew up with, they still think things are fine and dandy. Things are going good for them, and they don't want to rock the boat, and they are voting for Joe Biden. He told me that these people he knew were voting for Joe Biden. So, you know, these people haven't experienced the pain that so many of their fellow Americans have, but it's coming. Joe Biden promised after the midterms, he said, I'm not changing a thing. This president seems to deliberately be running on a platform to hurt the American people. It's part of a higher agenda, you know, the coronavirus social curbs, the vaccine mandates that they had, the runaway inflation. It almost seems intentional, and it is going to get worse. And as it gets worse, the idea is, you know, eventually it's going to touch people that it hasn't touched before.
Okay, now that makes sense. Now, do you think that the messaging that the Democrats were putting out there maybe help people to kind of forget about these issues? Or do you think it's more just the fact that a lot of people just weren't feeling it?
Yeah, absolutely not. Their messaging is not convincing. They know it's not convincing. What they have is extreme party loyalty that Republicans don't have. Pennsylvania is the perfect example. The majority of Republican voters never wanted Mehmet Oz to be the Senate nominee. They didn't even consider him a Republican half the time. They will stay home. A lot of them did come out and vote, but a significant number, I am sure, did not vote for the man. We're never going to vote for the man. John Fetterman suffered a stroke. It's unfortunate, but he was very debilitated. Serious questions that he could perform his duties. He couldn't even communicate in the lead up to the election. Democrats, no problems whatsoever voting in mass for him. Their party discipline is, and I hate to, sounds like a cheap shot, and I'm not trying to say that just as a cheap shot, but it's almost, Russian communists, Communist Party discipline. They will do what the party elders tell them to do. And, that's a very forceful weapon to have today. Republicans will be like, no, you offer me a candidate that I believe in or I'm not voting for him. Democrats see the color blue and they turn out to vote. And, that is a powerful weapon Democrats have. And it's very unfortunate for the country that they would choose that over quality candidates. But that is where we're at.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, Democratic voters are pretty loyal, whereas Republicans may not have that same sense of loyalty. And that might actually make Republicans concerned about what's going to happen in the Georgia runoff elections between Herschel Walker and Senator Raphael Warnock. But in your article, you wrote, quote, "The American people have not yet felt the full force of the storm." So I hesitate to ask this, but what do you think this storm is going to look like over the next 2 years? I mean, you mentioned that Biden said we're not changing a single thing.
Just think about that, the idea that it can get worse than it's been already. Get the vax or lose your job. We see the pain at the pump that we've had, but it is going to get worse. I think food shortages on a level that Americans have not experienced in their lifetimes. I'm talking, it could be as bad as the Depression era, which was 90 years ago. You see that they're deliberately doing this. You see it in overseas countries. They're getting us used to the idea that there's going to be these shortages of food. This whole thing, eat insects instead of meat. What are they setting us up for here? And I found it very interesting that Jeff Bezos the other day came out and kind of warned us all, being the little peons who aren't worth $150 billion, said, hey, now is not the time to go buying stuff.
Yep.
What is he telling? He's telling you, you can't buy a new refrigerator if you need it. It's like, okay, so, they're setting us up for more pain. It is intentional. It is to promote it, to further an agenda of theirs. And I do think food shortages to a painful degree are going to be the thing that to look out for.
And, when you speak of kind of priming us to prepare for this, I mean, it seems like almost every day, I'm a Twitter addict. So I always see these videos and these articles about how we can eat bugs. Today, I saw one with a recipe of this guy showing us how to make a burger out of insects. It was crazy. I'm like, I ain't going to eat that. But it's interesting that we're seeing this more and more on social media. I mean, it's almost like the algorithms are trying to get us ready. But when it comes to 2024, I mean, the campaign season seems to have already started with Donald Trump announcing his candidacy for the presidency. What do Republicans need to do to make sure they don't have a repeat of 2022 in 2 more years?
Well, I think number one is electoral integrity. And we don't have to talk about stolen elections. We can just talk about elections that Americans have confidence in. Florida and Georgia in 2018 were kind of the trial run for what Democrats are doing today. You had Stacey Abrams' first run for governor, and Andrew Gillum, if everybody remembers him, ran a tight race with Ron DeSantis in Florida. There was the same kind of thing where the election's not over on election day. Broward County, heavily Democrat, just wanted to go on, keep counting ballots over and over and over again, days after the election ended, basically until they had enough to pull Gillum over the top in a very tight race. Florida responded accordingly, and they've passed electoral integrity laws. Ballot boxes are out. Ballot harvesting is out. Mass mailing ballots is out. Arizona didn't do this. I'm not exactly sure how much Pennsylvania did, but they didn't do anything significant. And Arizona has these same problems again this year. And oh, look, it's the Republicans on the short end of the stick again. So step one is electoral integrity right there. Step two is to have candidates that, this is the Republican problem, have candidates that your voting base wants to vote for.
We'll definitely be keeping a track of it here at Liberty Nation. Thanks for joining the program, Joe.
Thanks. Great topic. I really enjoyed talking about it.
And remember, the show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe space.
You only did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.